Welcome to Paltzcast, an original student-produced podcast from the campus of SUNY New Paltz.
This is Season 10.
This season, decipher lies from reality in history's wackiest moments.
Delve into the world of sci-fi
from a woman's perspective.
Donate your thoughts on the thrifting racks.
Turn the page to discover new and old books.
And swipe right on today's college dating scene.
We hope you enjoy listening as much as we've enjoyed creating.
Subscribe for new episodes and topics every semester.
Welcome to The Hidden Curriculum, a podcast where we're unpacking the lessons we have to learn in and outside the classroom. I'm Erica, and we're talking with Black students and faculty about their experiences navigating a predominantly white institution. How do we fit in? How to stand out? How do we find our people? These are the lessons you won't find in the brochures. For many of us, we immediately notice when we're the only ones in a room. So representation means a lot.
Representation is important in the classroom, firstly, so that young people can see themselves in their teachers. Also that, there's a certain understanding, there's a certain familiarity, there's a certain ease. And despite what they say, our cultures are different. Our learning is different. And so if people don't understand that, people of color can really miss out if they have a white teacher who doesn't understand their culture, their language, their comfort level.
This is Essie Lewis, once Black Studies professor at SUNY New Paltz, now the director of the Dr. Margaret Wade Lewis Center for Black History and Culture.
My mother, Margaret Wade Lewis, grew up in segregation, and she taught me what loss it was for us to end up going to school with white people, with people who didn't want us in school, didn't think we knew anything, that we deserved to be there, didn't want to be with us. Whereas in segregation, all of your teachers were from your community, maybe your family members. They wanted you to do well because you were an extension of them.
Aizia, a senior here at SUNY New Paltz, shares a similar experience.
Just sitting back, realizing, counting on but one hand, honestly, how many Black teachers I've had. I'm thankful that I've had them, and teachers of color in general. But I think as you get older, especially, it's important for kids to see people that look like them in those positions, teaching them, educating them, and also providing those personal firsthand experiences that come along with a lot of these life lessons. It's not just about what's in the books, it's about perspectives, experiences, and how this world operates in real life, real time.
Felicia Hodges teaches journalism in the Digital Media and Journalism Department at SUNY New Paltz.
I'm always a unicorn. I've been teaching for about 32 years. I'm a career journalist as well, so I've always balanced the two. And whether I'm in a newsroom or a dark room or a classroom, I'm usually a unicorn. So many students will say, "You're the only Black instructor I've ever had." And, when I think about it, I had 2 in undergrad and none in graduate school. 2, right? You think that's insane. I was adjuncting at Dominican for a semester, filling in for a faculty member who was ill teaching a speech class. And I was going into the classroom, and literally a young lady was looking at me, and she stopped me, and wanted to hug me. She had never seen a Black woman, never seen a Black instructor. And we laughed about it, but that's such a sad thing, you know what I mean? Like, for many students, I'm sure I'm, if not the only one of the only Black instructors they've ever had, from preschool all the way through, undergrad, and that just shouldn't be. When I get guest speakers to come in, I look for women. I look for people of color. I look for folks that our students in general aren't used to seeing, and sometimes it's hard to find that. And first of all, they're working like daggone ramp mules, right? So getting them, to clear a space to come in is sometimes that can be tricky, but it's important. It's really, really necessary. Sometimes seeing it is necessary to even think that you could possibly do that.
Belonging can come with the cost. Many of us describe feeling like we have to edit ourselves to fit in certain rooms.
Now that my hair is white, it's a little bit easier, but I never wear jeans on campus, or almost never. Once in a while, in a pinch, like, dang it, I didn't do laundry, that kind of thing. There's this kind of unspoken rule that your professionalism has to be even more professional, right? It's, again, unspoken, but I don't want to be, not that there's anything wrong with being a student. I was a student for a while, but sometimes there feels like there could possibly be this assumption that you don't quite know as much as the person next to you, even if you've been doing it like me. This is my 32nd year. So that's a line I try and tread lightly. I make sure, it's crazy, code switching, right? Like, the diction and stuff like that.
Code switching is when someone changes how they speak, dress, or behave, depending on the environment.
It's different when I'm talking to folks on campus that look like me. I'm careful with perceptions, and although I can't control them, but it's almost like an eggshell walk.
With the DMJ major, you take a lot of media theory classes, and I didn't know what code switching was until they actually brought it up. And I realized that I code switch every time I talk. No matter who I'm talking to, if it's just a vibe I want to give off, or at work I code switch, at church I code switch, but at school definitely code switch, especially for new palts. I mean, a lot of people might not understand where you're trying to come from or what you're trying to say, so code switching is necessary.
Aizia ain't alone in this experience. Ethan, a junior, feels the same.
I would say I've code switched, definitely, for sure. And it's just not even in a negative way. It's just a way to get by. I feel like just not this sense of like fight or flight or like survival instinct. Just like the way to go by is like kind of have to code switch.
Lucas, a senior, talks about when he finds code switching to be necessary.
What triggers it is scenario and who I'm talking to. Like if I'm at a party, I feel like there's no point of code switching. Or if I'm hanging out with friends and they introduce me to somebody new, I feel like there's no need to code switch. But, talking to professors, answering questions, that's when it's needed.
Senior Zane echoes this sentiment.
There are a lot of moments when people see me as threatening, so I have to actively be mindful about always having to smile whenever I'm interacting with people, and or even walking around, or even in one of my classes. I believe this was last semester. One of my teachers, she basically would pick on me in a way. I would always be the person that she goes for whenever she's trying to make an example of someone, and then the only way that it took for her to stop doing that was once she started seeing my test scores were really high. Then that's what gave her this sense of, oh, this is someone that she can see as intelligent. It took my test scores for her to be able to treat me as a person and respect me in some way.
Some students have a different outlook, like senior Adia.
When I first came here, yes, absolutely. And then something in me clicked one day, and I told myself that I was no longer going to do that I would be as Black as I can be in any space that I enter, because it shouldn't be my responsibility to make other people comfortable.
When systems fail, we often build what we need ourselves, for us, by us. Clubs, friend groups, organizations. Community is joy, but also survival.
I think joining clubs on campus really made my experience better. I feel like I can be myself when I'm around people that look like me and people that come from the same backgrounds of me, and it's not very often that we find opportunities like that on this campus. So I think being a part of dance teams and student clubs definitely played a part in my feeling good here.
So a few ways that I found community. One of them is through clubs. I am part of the Fahari Libidad. It's a literary magazine club on campus where we focus on the experiences of people of color on campus. So that was one of the biggest spaces for community for me.
There's many outlets for POCs to be successful here at this campus, and we don't shy away from any form of what you want to be. You want to be a musician, you become a musician. You want to become a part of the Black Studies department. You want to be on Broadway, you could do that. You could begin that here. I think that POCs have just a bunch of talent, and the system has been undermining us for so long, and I just feel like the school won't not let you shine.
We all wonder what it feels like to not be the minority, to surround ourselves with culture, to be part of something that is so historically significant. But sometimes it doesn't work out that way. For many, finances, distance, family obligations, and opportunity makes choosing an HBCU complicated. HBCU means historically black college or university. These institutions were founded to educate black students during Reconstruction and segregation.
I went to undergrad Temple University in Philadelphia. Go Owls, hoot, that's mandatory. And I was an athlete in high school and wanted to continue. The Olympic team was in my head, and the team that recruited me was Temple University. While in it, I was like, gee, it'd be great if I had gone too, but yeah, so I miss it. If I could do it again, I don't, because the track was such a big part of it. Not that HBCUs don't have amazing athletic programs, but Temple recruited me. They knocked and said, hey, we'll pay for you to go to school. But I really like, Howard looks great, you know what I mean? So doing it again, I'm not sure. It's a tough one, but I'd love to teach at one, definitely that's on my agenda some way, somehow.
I think PWIs can learn a lot from HBCUs in terms of just diversity and how they go about making their community as diverse or not favoring towards just one specific race or ethnicity.
My family is very HBCU oriented, so when I said that I was going to a SUNY, they were more so like, but there's HBCUs, there's black colleges that you could go to. But I feel like being a black voice in a PWI is more significant to me because you have obstacles that you have to cross over, but also it's community that the kind of community that you build is different because we are not big in this space. So when the spaces that we are big in, we stand out more.
We all have a story where we face stereotypes, ignorance, and uncomfortable situations.
First of all, I grew up on this campus, which is wonderful. My mother became the chair of the Black Studies Department in '89, but she started working here in '74, so before I was born. People ask me all the time if I graduated from here, and I did not. Well, I went to Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia. The experience of Hampton University, there's this one hall called Ogden Hall. We would have to go there twice a day as freshmen, and you could not go in jeans. So you had to get dressed up, so it was like this ceremony of having respect and knowing you can't just go around in sweatpants and jeans and all these things, especially in this building. And there was a professor who used to say, if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And so she would just drill that into us. She wasn't having any of that colored people time stuff. She was trying to keep us from doing that. Being on the campus with all these people of color from all these different places and having all these professors of color, even though I had this experience at SUNY New Paltz, my mom was a professor, all of her friends, A.J. Williams-Myers, Zelbert Moore, Dr. Moore, all these PhD, very smart black people. But in the town of New Paltz, in the school district, it was different. I did not have a black teacher until I think I had Miss McCardle in middle school to teach typing. Miss Lee, who was actually the first black teacher who came to New Paltz after the civil rights movement. Schools had to bring black teachers in to get federal dollars. So Miss Lee came in as a gymnastics teacher. So I had her, but I didn't have many. So then going to Hampton University was very different. All of my teachers were people of color, and all of the students were people of color, and so it was really a beautiful experience.
And some have to educate our fellow peers, professors, and colleagues.
Seeing that unicorn, right, and going, oh, okay, getting past that and moving forward, but when you don't see us, not only for folks who don't look like us, but for folks who do, it feels like there's something missing. Journalism is a little bit different, at least print journalism is, because people don't know what I look like. They don't hear my voice, they don't see my face. Photojournalism is a little bit different. I do recall going into events and activities with camera bodies hanging from every arm and a camera bag and a press pass pinned to my chest, and people still questioning, well, let me get the manager, let me just make sure. I don't want to come to this train show. I'm here because I've been assigned to shoot it, right? So you hope that one experience helps people see you better, and same here in academia. You hope that folks who think about being an academic or, helping other people do what they do will consider it.
Even when I was a lawyer for 10 years, I would go to court and people would be like, what are you, the paralegal? And a piece of me was like, wow, this is, you're racist. But the other thing is it's not their fault. I was the only black woman attorney in the whole area. They weren't used to seeing it. It was not really their fault, but then also you shouldn't assume, but it's like they were playing the game of odds. The odds are this woman is not an attorney.
During my sophomore year, there was a student who felt valid in saying the N-word because he was reading something, and I had to take a moment to sit him down and explain to him why he shouldn't be doing that.
My one professor, he was talking about how there was 2 instances where he was talking about how there was a big uproar and controversy about the evolution line, and it was like something here at the school they were doing like some design or some they were doing some like design for the school to depict like the evolutionary line, and they changed it. You know what I'm talking about when it goes from monkey to human, and it's usually a white guy. So one of the designs was like a black guy, and like people started going crazy, and then he was laughing nervously, I noticed, like in class about it, and he kept looking at me. Personally thought it was funny because he just seemed like, you ever get that vibe when someone's just nervous? So that was one instance, and then the other one was pretty recent where he was talking about a cigarette like packaging that he had to design, and it was like and the people that he was working with saying like, oh, you got to target this for like African Americans. I don't know, just the way that he was saying African Americans was just, he kept saying it over and over again. I was like, all right.
There has been one time where I was the only black student in the class, and it felt like my responsibility to speak on matters because the conversation was very white. I say that by like, you could tell that the people who were talking, they were speaking from very ignorant backgrounds, and so I took it as my time to be like, let me let you guys know what you're actually talking about, because you run the risk of saying very harmful things when you don't know the backgrounds of who you're talking about and what factors play into whatever led them there.
Representation also has to live in the curriculum. That's why Black Studies departments matter. They don't just teach history, they challenge systems as a whole.
I did take some like summer courses, and I did take thousands of Black Studies courses. That's what I tell people, because I was in a lot of fashion shows and step shows and so many really wonderful pieces of our culture. I genuinely thought that SUNY New Paltz was a Black college until I was probably 12 or so, because Black Studies department was in College Hall, and then most of the Black students were in Shango, and a lot of the events were in Shango, and even when they weren't, the events that I went to were mostly Black people. So it wasn't until my mother started, it was even after Scholars Mentorship Program, but she was talking about retaining students of color and how important it was. And I was like, what are you talking about? There's nothing but students of color here. And she was like, no, that's just what you see, but not the real thing. So I guess I say that to say that Black Studies is like truly in my blood. PWIs do not possess the structure to nurture students of color.
PWI stands for Predominantly White Institution, which is a college or university where at least 50% of the students are white.
Having a Black Studies department lets students be with people like them, helps them to learn about themselves. There's no other place where you can learn Black history this way. And knowing about yourself, that's that tethering to the world, like, okay, this is how I belong here in this world, in this space. This is why I'm important to the world. And really telling the truth. Even now when organizations are like, oh yeah, we incorporate Black people and so on, they only go so far. I just went to a field trip with my daughter to a local historic organization who prides themselves on being so inclusive. And yes, they did talk about the slaves that they had, but it was like just that. You know what I mean? When they talked about the settlers and everyone else, they talked about where they came from, what they did, where they were, all this stuff. For the slaves, it was just like, yes, we had these 4 slaves. This is what they did here. But they didn't talk about where they came from in Africa. They didn't talk about why they took slaves from Africa. They didn't talk about all the wonderful things that we were doing in Africa and why they brought us here. You know what I mean? They like to pretend like they just... I don't know, like they just brought us here and we're lazy and there's all these stereotypes. But the fact of the matter is they brought us here because they needed us. They needed us for that blacksmithing, the woodworking, the mathematics, the science, the medicine, all those things that they could not do without us. And they left all that part out.
Feels like it goes without saying that it's such an important piece to any campus structure, right? Especially here in the U.S. with such a history of colonialism and, all the isms that are associated with that. But it just feels surreal that there would not be one. You know what I mean? When I hear, like Professor Dandridge talk about how old this African American Studies, Black Studies department is, and you think it's one of the oldest, that's freaking frightening to me. Like, what do you mean is the old? Like, wait, what? So necessary, and it'll be like one of those things that, although the space that it leaves, if it ever does go, will be felt immediately, the waves of all those ramifications will be far, far-reaching, like for years to come.
It's spreading the knowledge. It's making people aware that didn't know they were African descent, that, hey, you are African descent. You did come from Africa, whether you might not think you did. And, hey, like, this is what happened. This is the history, going way beyond what's supposedly in our history books. What really happened, who did what, who contributed what, and who was left out of what, and who was forced into what, and who is still not being represented for, and reparations have not been had, and, and who are still being disrespected.
I think it's important because people are able to be educated on these topics, and especially being in the U.S., a lot of history or a lot of Black history specifically is always pushed to the side or always actively being hidden, and it ends up being such an important topic to be able to know the things that that's happened in the past, understand the things that are currently happening, and knowing how we want to approach them in the future. There are so many situations where not only maybe the people around us are trying to oppress people of color or Black people within on campus, but even our government and the systems that are in place there. A lot of the times they're actively oppressing people and they're actively pushing people down. You can see that with ICE, even with them going around snatching up people of color. And yeah, for me, it's just having that Black Studies department. It really lets you know about the situation, know about how to approach it, and being students, we're supposed to be the next leaders of tomorrow in a way. We need to know what's happened and how to go forward.
Black Studies is way more than just ethnic studies. Black Studies is law. Black Studies is politics. Black Studies is sociology. Black Studies is psychology. Black Studies is history. Black Studies is every single thing that America is. So to know that it's nuance, it's art and music and theater, it's all of the disciplines in one. So to consolidate Black Studies and put it in a umbrella category, it's a disservice, and it is originated in racism. It's to say that you guys are just ethnic studies. And that's not just the Black Studies department, it's the Latin Studies department, it's the Asian Studies department. To consolidate a cultural studies group and just name it as a cultural studies is slap in the face to everybody who is getting their degree in that.
Thank you for listening to the Hidden Curriculum. We hope you enjoyed. We hope you learned something. We hope you enjoyed and learned something. We hope you enjoyed and learned something. We hope you enjoyed and learned something. Did you learn something? Period.
This episode of Podcast was brought to you by SUNY New Paltz's DMJ 333 podcasting class.
Special thanks to Ed and Gina Carroll for their generous support.
We hope you enjoyed listening as much as we enjoyed creating.
Don't forget to subscribe for new episodes every semester.
Paltzcast is written and produced by students at SUNY New Paltz. The views and opinions expressed by the podcast creators, hosts, and guests do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of SUNY New Paltz.